Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome to today's reflection. In the past weeks, we've been looking at the Easter story, asking the what, the so what, and the now what in relation to that great event. So we're continuing today with the now what. I saw Douglas Murray, the associate editor of The Spectator and public intellectual, being interviewed online, and the interviewer put to him the point that without all the weird stuff, if you removed that, religion would actually be quite good. And his response was interesting, that religion actually is about the weird stuff, and Christianity, he said, is about the virgin birth, the crucifixion, the resurrection of Jesus. If you take that away, you take away what makes religion so powerful and persuasive. And he's absolutely right. If you take away the weird stuff from the gospel, what are we left with? A Jesus who said some nice things and wants us to try and live a decent and good life and be nice to people. Not that there's anything wrong with any of these things. But is that it? Would that not make the faith quite insipid? It's the mystery, it's the weird stuff that gives it its power. And the resurrection and the whole Easter story, it certainly is within the category of the weird. Now I want to read a short passage, and it's from Luke's Gospel. And it's the famous Road to Emmaus story, or at least part of it, because it's a long section, so I won't read it all. But two of the followers of Jesus are making their way along the road, and they're despondent, and they're talking about the disappointment and the tragedy of what happened with the crucifixion of Jesus. And Jesus walks, the risen Jesus walks beside them, but they don't recognize him. And he asks them what they're talking about, and they share their disappointment and say, well, we had hoped that this Jesus would be the Redeemer of Israel. And then the stranger begins to draw their attention to the scriptures and how the scriptures point to the Messiah and how the Messiah fulfills these scriptures. And then we come to the passage I'm going to read. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening, the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us, while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together, and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way, and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. A weird story, strange story, and yet full of powerful imagery. The scriptures being opened up and the breaking of bread. The two things that come together for the life of the church to make it the Christian church. Firstly, at the centre, our understanding of God revealing himself in the scriptures, and of Jesus, the story of Jesus being powerfully witnessed to. And when we understand that story, our hearts burn within us. And then secondly, the breaking of bread, the sacrament. being together, fellowship and worship as a family of faith together. These two things. It's almost like two tracks of the railway line. Take one away, the train won't run. The church needs the scriptures and the interpretation of these scriptures to give us this amazing story that we are then part of. And secondly, worship together, the breaking of bread, the sacrament, fellowship, a family of faith together. These are the twin points for the life of the church. In evolutionary biology, there's a perspective known as punctuated equilibrium, which basically says that for long periods throughout geological time, life was fairly steady and there was stasis. But it was punctuated here and there with incredibly accelerated mutations and change. So new species came into being. And the whole history of life is punctuated by these episodes. And I like that metaphor because I think human history is a bit like that. We can look at it and we see great events like, for example, world wars or whatever, punctuating the course of human events. And Easter was a punctuated moment. It was dramatic and powerful. But then after it, life goes on in its normal way. So how do we take this incredible dramatic event and try and make sense of it in the here and now? How do we make Easter into the ordinary? Easter for the everyday. And that's where the Emmaus story is so powerful for us. Because it's about our understanding and our desire to know more about the scriptures. What is this incredible story all about? And secondly, in worship and fellowship with our fellow believers, a fire can burn there to stimulate us all as we share together our own story. We're part of this wonderful group of people who keep the flame burning of the gospel. And we've been part of God's family for as long as we've been believers. But that family has an incredible history. 2,000 years and counting. And we're not finished yet. But where are we on the journey? Are we like the disciples where sometimes we're a bit perplexed and confused and questioning? And we actually need to feel our hearts burning when we hear and understand anew and afresh the power of the gospel story. And do we need the discipline of worship, that we make the effort to be part of a family of faith and get stimulus and support that way? Our faith needs to be fed. It needs to be rooted in something. It can't only be something in our heads that every now and then we think about. We need to move from being observers to participants, from spectators to players. And we can only do that when we embrace this message and we start to embody it, even in small ways, that this story becomes our story. Like the disciples on the road there to Emmaus, their hearts burning with the power of the message being explained to them. And then secondly, in the fellowship and the worship of sharing at the table. These are things that are simple but profound. These are things that are basic but absolutely essential for who we are as a family of faith. May God grant us the grace to continue to grow in this weird faith, for him to bless us and to give us his grace through what we receive, through what we begin to understand, that may be cultivated and nurtured through the power of his Spirit working in us, and that we maybe take the next stage of being willing to talk to others about this, or to become part of a fellowship It's so easy to drift away from the church, but it's essential, especially in these days of challenge, that we are card-carrying members of this family of faith, and that we learn to play our part in this great drama that is unfolding, God's history in the midst of our history. Once again, thank you for watching and listening. Next week, there will not be a reflection. We're having a short break. God be with you. Amen.